Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Welcome to The Takeout. Happy New Year. It's great to be back. We will devote almost all of our attention tonight to Venezuela and what comes next. There are many what comes next angles. I'm sure you've already figured that out. There are the legal ones. Nicolás Maduro and his wife Celia pled not guilty to federal narco-trafficking charges today. What's the future of that case? Will there be any changes or alterations? How fresh is the evidence? Also, was the military assault that led to their arrest legal? Does Maduro retain head of state immunity from prosecution? Well, some legal questions. Also, President Trump says the U.S. is, unquote, quote unquote, in charge of Venezuela. What does that mean? Much of the Maduro regime remains in place and now seeks dialogue with the Trump White House. Does that mean a puppet regime is emerging? Will there be new elections? What becomes of the political prisoners jailed by Maduro? And what's the state of Venezuelan opposition leaders and their pursuit of a new Venezuelan political reality? Also, when the State Department posts, "This is our hemisphere," as it did today, what does that mean in Cuba, Colombia, Nicaragua, countries Trump allies say are now fully on notice? The president said over the weekend many times that he wants Venezuela's oil. How much does it really have? Maduro's predecessor, Hugo Chavez, you might be interested to know, inflated Venezuela's proven oil reserves by a factor of 4, boosting them from 80 billion barrels in 2005 to more than 300 billion barrels in 2014. That 300 billion barrel number is one you've probably heard about in recent days. And it could be fictitious. Why? Because Venezuelan oil is an extra heavy crude requiring expensive dilution and then more refining just to bring it to market. But it's under the ground doesn't mean that that oil is marketable or deliverable, especially with Venezuela's decayed oil infrastructure, depleted engineering workforce, and global prices trading at or just below $60 per barrel. Also, what becomes of the people of Venezuela? The scale of economic collapse under the Chavez and Maduro regimes is almost mathematically incomprehensible. The currency, the bolivar, has lost nearly all of its value, as have subsequent denominated currencies that followed. 90% of the country's 31 million people live in poverty. Inflation in some recent years ran above 1,000%. Last year, it was 556%. GDP has declined by more than 80%. Add to this Maduro's arrests of dissidents and other repressive ways, and it's plain to see why more than 8 million Venezuelans have fled their country. For more on the legal case against Maduro and his wife, I want to bring in Tom Dupree. He served in the Attorney General's office for President George W. Bush. We are also joined by CBS News legal analyst Caroline Polisi. Caroline, what transpired today and your immediate reflections on the legal case pending against Maduro, Nicolás, and his wife Celia?
Yeah, today was meant to be largely procedural, Major, but it was quite dramatic. I'd note, Maduro got in some, he said some things in open court. The Judge Hellerstein, had to sort of tamp down that rhetoric. But, it's, again, largely procedural. I'm here in front of the NBC Brooklyn, where he is housed and will likely remain throughout the pendency of his trial. They did not try to make a bail application, which I thought was smart. They'll gain credibility with the judge because there's no way he would make that bail application. But we're going to see, arguments. We know what arguments will be made from here on out. They will argue that the extraction of Maduro and his wife was illegal in violation of international law, domestic law, and that he should get head of state immunity. Likely, I think the court will follow that 1989 Manuel Noriega precedent and rule basically that he's here on American soil. We don't think he is the legitimate ruler of Venezuela, and therefore he won't get sovereign immunity.
Caroline, thank you so much for that. And we'll come back to you in a second. Tom, evaluate some of the things that Caroline just said. Based on historic understanding and application of U.S. law, was the extraction militarily led legal?
In my opinion, it was. But to Caroline's point, I think the legality of his extraction, I don't think is going to play much of a role in this case. Certainly if the defense lawyers rest their defense on the idea that Maduro is illegally extracted from Venezuela, that's a losing argument for them. I don't see that carrying the day for the reason that you mentioned, that there's a Panamanian precedent with Manuel Noriega out there. I don't think that this judge is going to say, you know something, you have sovereign immunity because you're the ruler of Venezuela. Sorry about that, sir. We'll let you go. That's not going to happen. Maduro is going to face the consequences of these charges, and he's going to have to fight them off. And if he can prevail, great, but he's going to have to defend those charges on the merits.
Noriega was recognized as the head of state by the U.S. government when he was extracted. Maduro isn't.
Right.
That's a distinction that's
absolutely
important.
Key difference. Just because Maduro claims he's the president doesn't automatically make him the president in the eyes of American law. And if this administration, as have past American administrations, this is not a new Trump thing, but if American administrations do not recognize him as a legitimate ruler, which is a fairly widespread view in the international community, there's no way a United States court is going to reject that view, declare Maduro the legitimate ruler, and let him go on that basis. That ain't going to happen.
And Caroline, the indictment released by the Justice Department has some fresh allegations, but many allegations that date back 2005, 2006, 2008, 2009. There's a body of evidence there that's going to be tested.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they have been investigating this case for decades, actually. I mean, they have allegations ranging back for decades. Remember, this is not a new indictment. This was a 2020 indictment that was then superseded. Pam Bondi recently released the superseder, which included the wife of the wife of Maduro and his son, which I find interesting because I think it could be a tactic on the part of the SDNY prosecutors to potentially extract some sort of deal. But no, these allegations are not new, and he's known about him being under indictment for 5 years now. So now, just as Tom noted, this is going to be sort of your run-of-the-mill criminal drug trafficking conspiracy case. Once we get through all of those motions, which will be made regarding the legality of the circumstances of the extraction, which I totally agree with Tom, they will be disposed of rather quickly. We'll move on to discovery. The arraignment starts that clock ticking for when the government needs to turn over discovery to the defense. They have Brady obligations, meaning everything they have and they intend to use at trial, they will turn over to the defense in this case. And we'll start to potentially see a trial.
And Tom, the place where they're being housed is not notorious, but it's not exactly thought of as a place that's comfortable. Not any detention facility in America is, but there are some that are more comfortable than this one. Do you think that the Maduros may seek to be moved? And do you think the judge might be amenable to that?
Well, they might seek to be moved. I think that's a bit of a tough challenge. In other words, it's one thing if you are someone who's incarcerated for the long term and you want to have kind of more of, the prison camp facility. There, a judge might be more amenable to saying, let's see if we can house them in that place and recommend to the Bureau of Prisons that's where they'd be placed. Maduro, however, is awaiting trial. And typically, if you're in that situation, you're going to be housed at a facility that is fairly near the courthouse. He'll have to be brought over to the courthouse from time to time. He'll come, he may testify, he may be present for hearings, and particularly given just the extensive security that has to be surrounding Maduro anytime he's moved from place A to B that we saw the other day, I don't see them moving him across the country during the pendency of this trial. And Tom, you're experienced in these types of prosecutions. When Caroline raises the prospect of possibly pressurizing the spouse and the son, how do you evaluate that? In a normal case, I would say that's actually a standard tactic, a common tactic that prosecutors will use, that you go after different people in the family in order to basically elicit a plea agreement from, say, the head of the family. In exchange, we won't prosecute your relatives. I'm not sure that plays out here, just because this is such an unusual case. Both Maduro's wife and his son are well-known political figures in Venezuela, so I'm not sure that dynamic plays the same way. And this also doesn't strike me as a situation where Maduro is going to be looking to kind of cut some sort of plea bargain. This strikes me as something where both sides are going to dig in their heels, the prosecutors, the defense, and this thing will move slowly but inexorably toward a trial. And Maduro probably calling himself some manner of judicial martyr in the surrounding... Well, and he already has. He's already said he's a prisoner of war, and we're going to get more of that. Tom Dupree, thank you very much. Caroline Polisi, also thank you. I want to bring in Katrina Kaufman, who joins us for what happened and what she saw and the atmospherics around it. So, Katrina, please take it away.
So I was in that courtroom when Maduro was arraigned earlier. He shuffled into the room. His feet were shackled, wearing that prison uniform. His wife was in the same one major, so khakis, navy shirt over an orange shirt. He stood up quite a bit in that courtroom to speak. Initially, the judge just asked him to confirm his identity, and he launched into a speech in response. It was in Spanish, a little bit of it was translated, and he said, "I was captured at my home in Venezuela." Judge Hellerstein cut him off and said, "There's going to be time for that later for us to talk about how this happened to you, but for now he just wanted to confirm who he was, made sure that he understood the charges against him, the indictment." Maduro did not want that indictment read in court. He said he was seeing it for the first time, but it had been explained to him, and he said he wanted to read it on his own personally. He was also informed of his right to remain silent, his right to counsel, his right to be not detained while he waits for a trial. And Maduro told the judge, "I didn't know about those rights until you informed me about them." For now, he is not seeking release, though, Major. They have said that they might seek bail later, and the judge encouraged them to do so as soon as they are ready. He also ordered the prosecution to turn over all materials that are favorable to the defense, and they've set another date. On March 17th in the morning, we're all going to meet. For now, though, the defense is waiving his right to a speedy trial. They want more time to deal with all of this and to file some of those motions that you were just talking about with Caroline and Tom. They have already said that they plan to challenge the legality of his arrest as a fundamental issue here.
Katrina Kaufman, thank you so very much. I really appreciate it. This was the scene Saturday as President Trump and his top advisors watched in real time the U.S. military operation in Venezuela play out. They did so from his club at Mar-a-Lago. Among those at the table, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, who told CBS News over the weekend, when it comes to the future of governing Venezuela, quote, "President Trump sets the terms," unquote. We turn now to the White House, where we find our Ed O'Keefe. Ed, I believe you have some new reporting on some meetings the president will have with U.S.-based oil executives.
Well, at least administration officials, Major. Good evening. Happy New Year. We know now that representatives of Exxon, Chevron, and ConocoPhillips are expected to meet at least with the Energy Secretary, Chris Wright, possibly as soon as Thursday, to discuss how exactly American energy firms might begin the process of tapping back into those Venezuelan reserves, however much may be down there. Remember, there are going to be a lot of concerns in that industry about the cost of this, not only in terms of money, but manpower and security. How stable a situation are they walking into there potentially? How many thousands of people might be needed to help tap into those reserves or rebuild the infrastructure that's there? And what assurances might they get from this administration that this is a long-term commitment? Because it could take until well after the end of this administration for some of that work to begin, according to one person I spoke with. And so there's going to be some resistance, at least at the beginning here, about doing this. But you heard the president repeatedly over the weekend say he wants whoever's in charge of Venezuela right now to make sure that the U.S. gets total control and access to those reserves, arguing that it was the United States that built out the infrastructure for its industry, and the United States deserves to get it back.
Ed, in his remarks over the weekend, the president said there would be, he hoped, a judicious transition. In your conversations today or over the weekend, have you gotten any guidance on what that might look like or what the timetable might be?
Not yet. And we believe that is part of what the senior administration officials who are briefing top lawmakers at this hour up on Capitol Hill are going to get asked about and have to respond to is to what extent are you really engaged in the governing of this country, and are you trying to set them up for a new round of elections, have the current government step away after a handful of months and respect those that came a little more than 2 years ago, or what? Exactly. You heard the president over the weekend suggest that the interim president now, Delcy Rodriguez, is in charge and is someone that he, for now at least, believes he can work with. But if things don't work out there, then she too could face a fate similar to Maduro, and suggested that the opposition party, which is built, at least publicly, around Maria Corina Machado, the woman who won the Nobel Peace Prize last month, but really was only running, remember, as vice president because Venezuela's Supreme Court had barred her from running for the presidency, isn't popular enough, doesn't have the mandate. That's going to run into the buzzsaw of South Florida politics, and I know you're getting into that a little later with Mario Diaz-Balart and others who have backed her movement and believe that she is the rightful elected vice president, at least, of Venezuela. A guy named Edmundo Gonzalez would be the president had those election results come through. So all of that to be sorted out. It was telling, Major, today that the UN ambassador, Mike Waltz, was up at the Security Council, an emergency meeting called by Venezuela and other countries to suggest to them there's not a total occupation underway. He said there is no war against Venezuela or its people. We are not occupying a country. This was a law enforcement operation in furtherance of lawful indictments that have existed for decades. The United States arrested a narco trafficker who is now going to stand trial in the United States. That differs to some extent from what the president was saying. We are in charge, right? That's what he said multiple times and in multiple interviews. At least the diplomats, Secretary of State and now Ambassador Waltz, suggesting to the world, not quite that, but obviously we're going to maintain some interest. And it's mostly that economic embargo blocking those oil tankers to come to and from Venezuela that will continue as leverage.
The contours of further administration actions in Venezuela and possibly the region yet to be determined. Ed O'Keefe at the White House, thank you so very much.